That works to keep America and its great cities prosperous, safe, and free. We are very fortunate to be joined by Scott Jennings, the defending champion, the warrior, the founding partner of RunSwitch Public Relations, and a political commentator on CNN. You may recognize him from his viral 1 against 5 sparring matches on CNN's Abby Phillips show, or from his popular podcast. He is also the author of A New Look Inside Washington and the Early Days of the Trump Administration, a revolution of common sense. Jennings' career has taken him across the country as part of 4 presidential campaigns and numerous federal and state races. He served in key roles in both of President George W. Bush's campaigns before becoming special assistant to the president. He held senior campaign positions for U.S. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Congressman Brett Guthrie, and Mitt Romney for president. We're also joined by several of our esteemed trustees, Ravenel Curry, Ken Gilman, Susie Edelman, and Mike Kaufman, who are just incredible friends to us, and we're so grateful to have them here. Thank you all for being with us tonight. Your support makes our work possible. Now, allow me to grill Scott Jennings. Allow me to unravel and do what it is an army, a literal flotilla of CNN employees have been unable to do, which is rattle him for even half a second. Okay, so Scott, I first met you in a green room, and just watching a bunch of others mangled, damaged, sweating, and you look perfect. You know, totally, the coif, not a hair out of place. What on earth is it that made you such a cool customer? How is it that you're able to deal with these slings and arrows so terribly effectively?
Well, it's easy to remain calm when you know you're going to be right every single time. By the way, I'm unaccustomed to speaking for more than 6 or 7 seconds at a time without being interrupted. So if you could yell at me, it would be very helpful. I don't know how to do this in a non-adversarial way. But no, look, preparation and confidence in what we believe in. And that's pretty much what I do every day. And after doing it now for a few years, I kind of know what to expect from some of the libs that I own. I just have a lot of confidence in what we're doing. I have a lot of confidence in our value system, and I have a lot of confidence in the preparation I do every day. It engenders a lot of calm in me, and repetition also breeds good. A lot of practice breeds good performance.
So you're a Kentuckian,
yeah.
And when you were growing up, Kentucky was not the red state it is today. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how your worldview emerged, how you found yourself as this conservative warrior that you are.
So I grew up in a family of Democrats. My grandfather was a New Deal Democrat and a local elected official. My dad was a union official and a garbage man and a factory worker. So I grew up in a household that was a Clinton household. I didn't know a bigger Clinton fan than my dad. And I also will tell you, my dad was the first person to tell me that Donald Trump was going to be the next president. I told him he was full of shit, of course, and he reminds me of that often. It's not the only time that he was right and I was wrong. But I grew up around Democrats in an area of Western Kentucky that was Democratic. But I registered to vote in the 96 election, and I was really enamored, frankly, with the Republican Revolution of 1994. It spoke to me as a teenager, and I've been a Republican ever since, and I've lived through a lot of different iterations of it. But as I write in the book, the through line to me is quite clear. We're the only party that fights for the future of Western civilization, and that has never changed. Whether that was Newt or George W. Bush or Mitt Romney or Donald Trump, we're all basically aligned on the same worldview. The future of the West is in the balance, and we're fighting people who are anti-American, anti-Western, and quite radical. I've always felt very comfortable in my support of the Republicans. Interestingly, all these Democrats that I grew up around, including my dad, they're all our people now, because I think they realized too over time that the left had left them far behind, both culturally and economically. So I do come from a family of Democrats, and I like to say I was blazing a trail for my father. He comes to my speeches sometimes, and I always tell the story about him being a Democrat, and after every one, he always says, "Do you have to put that in there? Do you have to tell everybody about that?" And I'm like, "No, it's endearing, for you. Your journey, it's endearing."
talk to us a little bit about those early days of you getting involved, cutting your teeth on a campaign. So, Kentucky, again, Appalachia writ large, that region of the country was a swing region. These are regions that Bill Clinton won, won folks like your dad. What did that look like, that knife fight of actually moving people? What was the big trigger for that movement?
You're right. Clinton did win Kentucky twice. That's absolutely true. He never got 50% of the vote. Interestingly, the last Democrat in Kentucky in a federal statewide race to get 50% of the vote was Wendell Ford in 1992. That's going back a long way. But in 2000, that's when I joined a political campaign. And the Bush for President campaign was my first. And Kentucky was thought to be a swing state. Clinton Gore won it twice. Gore was the nominee. But by Labor Day, we had it pretty well in hand. I actually spent a good chunk of my fall in West Virginia, which was also a Democratic state that was thought to be moving in our direction. But the fight was somewhat economic, but in my recollection, it was also very cultural. The Democrats started to tack pretty far to the left in those days, and then it really accelerated during the Obama years. And so for my political work back in Kentucky, to go from a state that when I started was 60% Democrat to a state that today is like 43% Democrat, we now have more than they do back home in Kentucky. It's a pretty remarkable climb. So I think a lot of it was cultural. Some of it was candidates, and a hell of a lot of it was Mitch McConnell building the Republican Party of Kentucky.
So I'm really glad you mentioned that, Scott. Leader McConnell is someone who is a really important part of your political formation. That was one of the really key mentors for you, someone with whom you worked so closely for many years. And he's someone who I think is going to be remembered as an historic figure. When you think about the length of his tenure, but also all that he accomplished in that time. However, there are a lot of folks on the right today who look at former leader McConnell, Senator McConnell, as a squish. They look at him as the establishment. They look at him as someone who that the party needs to move beyond and past. That's not your view, I gather. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about that, because you began by saying that, hey, from the beginning, working in the 90s, working to now, the right is fighting for Western civilization. That's continuity. But there are some discontinuities here, too, and I wonder if you could talk to us about them.
A question. Who in here enjoys a 6-3 Supreme Court? Yeah. Welcome to Team Mitch. I mean, that's what I tell everybody who carpet at me about Mitch McConnell. Do you like having a 6-3 Supreme Court? Of course you do. And this was his project. And that's why he and Donald Trump will be forever linked in history, because together they changed the court and they saved America when they did it. And so are they golfing buddies? No. Are they social companions? No. Do they play bridge? No. But that's okay, because they did something far more important than hang out together. They saved America when they saved the Supreme Court for a generation. And so yes, he has been at odds with Trump on a few issues. Interestingly, going into this term, everybody was just sure that McConnell was going to be a thorn in Trump's side. It's Rand and it's Massey in Kentucky who are actually a thorn in Trump's side most of the time. And McConnell, frankly, has been quite helpful, particularly on passing the big, beautiful bill. McConnell internally in the Senate, I know for a fact, probably changed 2 or 3 minds on that right at the end. And so McConnell's been helpful to Trump, whereas Trump's had trouble with 2 others in our delegation. So, it's a little interesting, in the Team Mitch camp and the people who are been out of shape because of the things that Trump has said about McConnell. But I've happily voted for them both every single time they have been on the ballot, and would continue to do so if permitted. I guess I'm not going to be, but I would.
So, Scott, I wonder, one reason why I think you have so many admirers is that you're able to articulate the case for conservatism, for a center-right politics, in a way that feels 80-20. You write about this a bit in your book. You really laser focus on what are the common sense issues, and the book is called A Revolution of Common Sense, that really unite people. When you look at the 2024 presidential campaign, those were the issues that President Trump ran on. Thinking about, men and women's sports. When you're thinking about DEI, things that really offended people's sense of fairness. But we're seeing a lot of fractures on the right now. So what is your communication advice to other folks on the right? How is it that you keep that focus on the 80-20 issues rather than the issues that are dividing the conservative coalition?
Well, I agree with you that it's the 80-20 issues that help propel Trump, and he has this instinct for finding them and really driving them home. That phrase, a revolution of common sense, you might remember is a phrase that he coined in his inaugural address. And I actually thought at the time that I heard it, A, it would be a great title for a book, and B, this is the most efficient description of his branding of the Republican Party and the conservative movement. And when I went with him to Michigan on his 100th day in office, we flew to Michigan for a rally. And in the speech, he said, whether you're on the right, whether you're on the left, or whatever the hell you are, it's just common sense. I interviewed him and asked him, do you consider yourself to be a conservative or just a common sense guy? And he said, well, most of the time, conservative is common sense. But he left himself a little wiggle room, you know. But that to me is the description of how he has branded the party, and he likes to define the party around the issues on which the lines are the brightest. You mentioned men and women's sports. This issue sunk the Democrats in 2024. And, you know, if I can't trust you not to put a boy in a girl's locker room, why would I ever listen to you about tax or health care policy? You know, I wouldn't, because you're a lunatic. I mean, it's obvious. And so Trump instinctively knows this, and he is a master at putting these issues front and center. And of course, if we're the party of common sense, they are reflexively the party of uncommon nonsense. And they take the opposite to him on every single thing. So he makes the transgender issues, the boys and girls sports issues center front in the campaign, and they cannot help themselves but continue to go all in on something that the vast majority of Americans find to be sheer lunacy. And so that's been part of his marketing genius. And you know, when I talk about these things on TV, I rather enjoy forcing Democrats to die on these 80-20 hills, because it's a joy to watch them do it. And I see in their eyes, they know they're dying on the hill, and they just, like, I'm looking at you, and I know that you know that I know that you're dying right now. And yet, because they essentially preside over the French Revolution right now, they cannot stop themselves, because they fear, as one Democrat senator said in the Hill the other day, the guillotine from their base. And so, but it is quite fun for me to put them on the defense on a lot of these things.
I'm not asking you to name any names. That would be unfair. But you spend a lot of time in green rooms. You spend a lot of time talking to these folks who are your interlocutors, your fellow combatants when it comes to these panels. And I wonder, you know, what are some of the things that have been revealed to you about, you know, someone taking the 20% position, you know, when they're out there under the Klieg lights, but then maybe taking a different position when they're chatting with you off stage? Talk to us a little bit about that dynamic.
The contributors and the sparring partners that I have are diverse. My two best friends at the network are actually Van Jones and David Axelrod. We spend a lot of time together. We travel together. Van and I travel the country together and do a lot of speaking engagements. I find them both to be experienced and thoughtful. Not everybody falls into those categories. They're good listeners, but they often instinctively know when things are off the rails. And what I admire about them actually is their willingness to tell their own people when they're wrong, especially Van. And lately on the issue of Israel and anti-Semitism, he has shown enormous courage in the face of a massive amount of pushback. And so I appreciate that about Van. Axe was the first person to tell the Democrats Joe Biden shouldn't run for president. And I was there when it happened, and boy, the White House came down on him like a ton of bricks, but he stood up to them. And so, you know,
So that's someone who actually says it on camera. He's actually willing to, you know, break with, you know, kind of break with his faction, break with his side. Mm-hmm. But I imagine there are a lot of folks who, you know, are trying to kind of, you know, smooth things over, say one thing in one place, say a different. I'm not asking you to name names, but does that happen?
Yes. Well, look, there are people in this business who engage in punditry for the purpose of access or making people happy, or, you know, it's good for their current professional pursuits, and they're not interested in rocking any boats out there. And there are also people out there who are capable of sort of reading 3 bullet points and going no further. But then there are people actually who are capable of listening and formulating an original thought. It's rare, but it does happen. And those are the ones that I think make the best television. But sure, I mean, there are people who know they have to go out there and say one thing, but in their heart and in their brain, they know what they're doing is patently ridiculous. It happens every single day.
Did you ever have to do that as a professional communicator? I mean, now you're independent, you're out there, you can speak your mind, but, you worked on a lot of campaigns. Did you ever have to go out and spin something that you didn't think was 100% on target?
Have I ever had to spin something? Me? Never. Of course. We all have clients, and we all represent people if you're in this business. And so you go out and do your best that you can. And sometimes, when you're working for politicians, they do and say things that are kind of ridiculous, and you do your best to keep them on the right path, but sometimes they get off of it. But when your job is to try to put lipstick on a pig, you get the best lipstick you can find. And I was pretty darn good at it, actually, back when I did that job. And so, and I admire it. And I do think political actors and political operatives deserve a lot of credit for some of the hazards that they encounter on a daily basis. I mean, politicians, it may shock you to learn, are not perfect, and they make lots of mistakes. And so the people around them who try to clean it up have a special place in my heart, since I used to do it for a living.
So of those 80-20 issues that we saw in 2024, one of them was, of course, immigration.
Yeah.
This was an area where, you were there for the Obama years. You were there for a different time when the Obama administration felt they had to pay lip service to the idea that, we need common sense immigration enforcement. Maybe that wasn't in their heart of hearts, but they believed that they had to convey that message. By the time you get to the Biden presidency, man, oh man. I mean, you have this asylum crisis and trying to get people to pretend that it doesn't really exist. It was really quite astonishing. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about how that immigration message has played out since President Trump has been inaugurated for a second term. It seems that, first of all, you had some really strong positions, 80-20 positions. We're going to deport criminals. We do not care if you like it or not. We're going to deport people who are vehemently anti-American, who kind of lied when they were trying. We're going to kind of take on those dangerous elements. It does seem as though now that there's some softening, right? One thing that you saw with 2024 is that you had a huge surge of Hispanic voters who were backing the president, who embraced his common sense agenda. Now it feels as though there's a little bit of weakening there. You saw those 2025 election results. If you, as a professional communicator, if you're talking to the White House, you're telling them, here's how we ought to message on immigration. Here's the message we want to get clearly across. What is that message?
Well, I interviewed Todd Lyons, who's the acting director of ICE, actually, not too long ago. And he told me something. He's great, by the way. And he told me something. I think about it almost every day. He's been in the agency for over 20 years. During the Biden administration, they were instructed not to enforce several certain federal laws. They were flat instructed not to enforce the law. We haven't passed any new laws since Trump became president. All they're doing is enforcing the existing laws. And I don't regard that as being controversial at all. And so I think one thing that we have to make clear is that we're simply enforcing the law. If Congress wants to change the law, they're welcome to do that. But right now, these are the laws that we have, and we're going to enforce them. I think one of the biggest problems Trump is facing is the propaganda campaign that's going on about what they're actually doing. They're not kidnapping American citizens. They're not zip tying children. They're not disappearing pillars of the community from Maryland down to El Salvador. And the onslaught of propaganda around this is absolutely breathtaking and rivaled only by the propaganda campaign that came against Israel after October the 7th. But I think the people who hate Trump and hate the West learned a valuable lesson after that October the 7th, is that if you engage in a massive propaganda campaign, you can get the media to go along with you. And that's what's happened, I think, on immigration. I still think a majority of the American people want Trump to enforce immigration law. And I still think it's his best success domestically. I still think it's his best issue. And I still think it's the thing that motivated him along in the first place. And I want him to keep going, because I think what we learned is we've had effectively 0 border crossings for 5 months. 0 laws passed, but 0 border crossings. And the only difference is enforcing existing law, which communicates to the rest of the world, don't try it. The old communication was, get here and it'll probably work out for you. The new communication is, don't try me. And it's working. And I think that's what people want. And so I don't feel poorly about any of this. I I do think what they're doing is being lied about.
Yeah.
And I fight this every night on the debating show. I hear somebody come in every night and say, well, they're kidnapping people. They're disappearing people. You know, they're taking American citizens off the street and detaining them indefinitely. I hear this every night. And every night I'm the only one that corrects it.
So, Scott, as someone who understands messaging better than anyone, I wonder, do you believe that having brought order to the border, having established real meaningful control, that now might be a time to, have a Nixon goes to China move and say that, hey, we're going to be really tough, but we're also going to be, compassionate, or we're going to say that, hey, we're going to fix legal immigration in this or that way to enrich the country. What do you think about that?
Well, I think the president already started doing it the other day when he made his comment on H-1B visas. I mean, he clearly understands the economic reality of that, and it made a bunch of people mad. The truth is, he's presiding over an extremely diverse coalition when it comes to immigration. He's got a significant part of his base that wants to deport everybody and have no immigration at all. He's got the agriculture sector, my farmers, that he talks about, that have been in his ear about farm workers. He's got other business sectors that are in his ear, and then he's got the tech sector and some specialized manufacturing sectors, like he's discussed this Korean plant that got raided. And so he's being pulled in a number of different directions here. And what I interpreted his commentary the other night to Laura Ingraham was, look, we're going to have to be smart about this, at least in the short run, until we can train up the people that we need to train up. And so I think he instinctively knows that, but he has a significant portion of his coalition that would prefer no illegal or legal immigration at all. Now, we have had a net negative migration in this country. We have deported a bunch of these radicals from college campuses who did not need to be here. I do think the crackdown is real, and I do think people appreciate that, but he'll have some selling to do to some of his base if he wants to continue to go down the road on, say, the H-1B visa program. One way to message around it would be to say, look, healthcare. You go to a rural hospital in Kentucky, and a lot of the doctors there come from other places. A lot of the nurses do too. That's true all over rural America, and those are his people. And so that's one sector that probably needs his help on this, and you could explain it in a way that everybody who lives in those communities would say, oh yeah, he's right about that too.
You mentioned the tech sector, and that was a really key part of his 2024 coalition. And in your book, you write about Doge and why you consider Doge to be a defining feature of President Trump's second term. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about Doge, even in the wake of Elon Musk's departure from the White House team.
Didn't you hear? We're back, baby. Elon's back. He was at the state dinner last night. So I'm happy about that. And Thank God.
You came into Republican politics in the mid-'90s in an age when shrinking the size of government was really foregrounded in conservative politics. Talk to us a little bit more about Doge.
The reason I think Doge spoke to me is because I remember those days when we were all about slicing and dicing the federal government. We never did it, but we were all about it. and so it appealed to me. And what they were doing, I think, I talked to most of the cabinet for this book. Everybody agreed the impulse and the principles were correct. I think the public relations might have been askew somewhat, and I think Elon ran into the Washington, quicksand a little bit. When I interviewed him for the book, I could tell he was bent out of shape. I interviewed him on Trump's 101st day in office, and I could tell he was bent out of shape with Washington. He didn't think people shared his urgency for what he believes are a converging set of issues that are going to lead to the country's downfall: the debt, the devaluation of our currency, the birth rate crisis, and the mass migration crisis. I think he didn't think people take it as seriously as he does. First thing he told me was, I'm trying to make America not go bankrupt. And so he cares about this deeply. And I'm glad it appears to me they're getting back together somewhat. I think what they did together in 2024 was the most important partnership in modern presidential campaign history, and it helped Donald Trump win. He's certainly more at home with us than he is with them. I mean, let's not forget, just a few months ago, the other ideology in this country was burning down his Tesla dealerships, firebombing and vandalizing his cars, and physically threatening his life on a daily basis. I don't think they're going to welcome him back. But we ought to, because he's more one of us than he is one of them. But I think the principles of this are good. I think it needs to continue. And I think, look, if this is not dealt with at some point, he is right. It is going to lead to the downfall of the country. And you can grow your way out of it a little bit, but some more cutting is going to be required. And they started a little bit in the big, beautiful bill, but boy, there's a long way to go.
Scott, you talked about those tensions within the Trump coalition, within the conservative coalition on immigration. It seems that when it comes to the size of government, there's some tensions there too, right? You know, on the one hand, you have this incredible expansion of the conservative coalition, bringing in some of those blue collar folks, those people whose, you know, parents and grandparents were New Deal Democrats into the tent. What that also means is that those are a lot of folks who are now voting Republican, but who are really going to fight ferociously to defend their Social Security and Medicare. These are folks who in many cases are public employees. When you're in a state like Kentucky or a state like New York, you got a lot of other folks who vote red, but who are people who really depend on public employment or government subsidies or you name it. Yet you're someone who is a real principled small government guy. How do you reconcile that? How do you bring that new blue collar constituency with you towards the Doge agenda?
Well, I think that the debates we're having right now, say over SNAP benefits, are illuminating to that blue collar constituency. Effectively, what we're asking working people to do right now is to go to work, pay their taxes, put food on their table, and put food on somebody else's table. And they know it. 43 million people. I was shocked when I heard that number, to be honest. When we exposed some of the fraud and expansion of the Medicaid program in the big, beautiful bill debate this summer, and you had Democrats vehemently arguing that the best thing to do was to put everybody on Medicaid, including illegal immigrants. I think the way to talk to our new blue-collar Republicans is to say, we'd like you to go to work, we'd like you to put food on your own table, and we're not going to make you responsible for putting food on anyone else's table, particularly illegal aliens. I think that is the best communications vector for us. But I think you can also have compassion and say these programs were designed for people who need them, designed for American citizens who need them. They weren't designed for people who are guests here or who came here illegally, and they weren't designed for people who want to commit fraud. They were designed for people who need them, and they were not designed to be a lifestyle. And where I come from, honestly, for a lot of people, these government dependency programs have become a lifestyle. People get on them at an early age and they never get off of them. People aspire to get on them and never come off of them. It's terrible. I mean, it is a sad commentary on people having no belief that they can grow beyond the idea of getting on a government program and never getting off of it.
I have to say, Scott, you make this sound like common sense, but there are some folks on the right who are embracing a kind of Democrat-light government perspective. So I hope that they're listening to you.
Well, I think there's a place for this welfare regime, but it is not a lifestyle. It is not designed to be cradle to grave government dependency for you. And no Republican should ever run on that or believe in that. And for the people who need it for a short period, fine. But everybody else, as far as I'm concerned, should not be thinking of this in the way that Democrats think of it. I mean, they need you to believe that they're the most important and highest authority in your life. That's what they need. And when you put people in these programs for their entire life, that's what they come to believe. We can't simply morph into that. That's a losing proposition, in my opinion. So, look, I thought it was courageous what they did on Medicaid reform this summer. We now need to do it on SNAP. I guess they're going to make everybody reapply for it. But I think what we're going to find out is there's a heck of a lot of people who are on this that don't need to be on it, don't qualify for it, aren't citizens, and so on and so forth. And to the extent that the principles of Doge and the principles of smaller government lead us to taking these things to their natural conclusion, shrinking these programs and kicking off people who shouldn't be on there, that'll inure to our political benefit, I think especially with our working class constituents.
One of our core pillars at the Manhattan Institute is a commitment to colorblind meritocracy. We really believe that this matters on moral grounds, it matters on practical grounds, and that's been a big motivator for us for our policy work, for our journalism. You've called President Trump's actions to end DEI the most consequential policy action of the 21st century and compare them to Obamacare in terms of how consequential they were. Talk to us a little bit about the steps that the president has taken and why they didn't get all that much attention.
Well, one of the things he did when he took over was he did so much on the first day that he sort of overwhelmed the system. And I learned this while I was writing the book. When you're a Republican president, you face three things. Democrats who hate you and want to destroy you, the media who hates you and wants to destroy you, and the entrenched federal bureaucracy that hates you and wants to destroy you. And they often overwhelm Republicans. Trump decided to overwhelm them. And I think he largely succeeded. Part of this was his effort to rip out DEI root and branch, which he has largely done. And, it's happened in the middle of a whole bunch of other things. But he absolutely has done it. And I think it was one of those 80-20 issues, frankly, that he communicated to people and they were strongly behind him on this. I think the country has moved on from all of this. And they have no problem whatsoever with him moving us away from this race-based policymaking in every single thing. I interviewed a guy on my radio show this week. There was a rule in the Medicare program. They were paying doctors' offices through Medicare under Biden extra reimbursement money if they would implement an anti-racism plan in their doctor's office. I said, were they paying doctors extra money if they got patients well? No, it was just the anti-racism plan. This infected every corner of the federal bureaucracy. And then, as an extension, it infected every corner of corporate America. That did. The transgender ideology did. All of this sort of uncommon nonsense infected all of society. Everybody in here knew it was nonsense. Everybody in here knew it was a wet blanket on the country, but everybody in here probably felt threatened at some point in their life if you dared speak up about it. And one of Donald Trump's superpowers is just to say out loud what we're all already thinking. And DEI has been one of those issues, and the country is better off for it. The executive order alone, mandating getting it out of the federal government, I think was a permission slip to other institutions that, we don't have to do this either anymore. And I think it's going to be one of his most important things. I mean, if the Democrats come back in 28, I assume they'll reinstall all this, but it would be but the country, I think, is better off without it, and I think people inherently are happier without it.
One thing I'm struck by is that you worked on both of President George W. Bush's campaigns. You knew that administration exceptionally well. And that was another effort to broaden the conservative tent in order to bring in Hispanic folks, black voters, you name it. And then President Trump managed to broaden that coalition as well. However, he did it in a very different way. I wonder if you could briefly talk to us about the contrast that you saw between how President Bush sought to build that more inclusive coalition and how President Trump did it.
Well, Trump's coalition is quite broad because it's colorblind. I mean, it's really agnostic of race, but it really has more to do with working class affiliations as opposed to racial affiliations or identity markers of any kind. I mean, where Trump's appeal is working class people who don't think of themselves as political. Maybe they don't vote that often or vote at all. They don't think of themselves as Republicans or conservatives or Democrats or liberals. They just think of themselves as everyday people, and they don't want to be affiliated with a political label. They like the idea of being called common sense. That appeals to them. But he appeals to people who are not political, and he drew them in. With Bush, it was interesting. We appealed back in 2004. I ran his campaign in New Mexico. We used very, very specific issues. Education actually was one of the ways we won over Hispanic families in New Mexico in 2004. They thought their kids were in failing schools, and President Bush was going to fix them and give their schools and their kids a better chance at success. So we used very, very micro-targeted issues to go after very, very specific kinds of people. Trump's appeal is a lot broader. Are you a working class American who is sick of the elites putting boys in girls' locker rooms? Are you tired of being told that you have to respect one of the 77 genders in the drop-down menu when you fill out your name on some customer service form? I'm your guy. And it had nothing to do with identity, but it had everything to do with common sense. And that was, the appeal to that for people who are not political cannot be understated. They're not going to read your white paper on, tax rates and healthcare policy and so on and so forth. But talk to them about whether we're just Mr. or Mrs. Happy to do that. And happy to believe that if you're somebody who cares about that, then you're somebody I can identify with.
You've established that a huge animating cause for you is the defense of Western civilization. You touched briefly earlier on about this incredible, vehement, noxious, anti-Israel ideology that's emerged on the hard left, that's become really potent, that seems to have terrified a lot of the Democratic establishment. You see people kowtowing to this. And I think it's fair to say that you're now seeing a faction emerge on the right that is also taking an anti-Israel stance. I wonder how you think about that when you're thinking about trying to build a big, broad, common sense, conservative majority coalition. How do you see the rise of this anti-Israel faction?
Well, this might be a groundbreaking statement, but I don't consider idolizing Hitler to be common sense or conservative in any way. And I don't, or Stalin or whatever the hell else that asshole said. Look, this is not a free speech issue. Free speech has to do with government coercion. This is a question of what kind of speech we want to be associated with. A political party is not a sponge. We are not forced to absorb every liquid that oozes in under the door. We are a political party. We are a political ideology. We get to decide what we're for and what we're against. We get to decide who we're going to associate with, and we get to decide what kind of speech we want to represent us on the world and national stage. We are not forced to absorb every person who walks in the door and says, hey, I'm a conservative, now absorb all my views. If somebody walked in there right now and said, let's raise taxes tremendously, we'd kick their ass and throw them out on the street. So if somebody walked through that door right now and said, here's the latest Jewish conspiracy theory, here's why they're bad, here's why Hitler had a good point, here's why Stalin was awesome, I don't know why in the world we would have to absorb that asshole into our political movement, because it's going to kill us if we do. And so my personal view is that there's a horseshoe going on here. Radicals on both flanks who see a lot of personal enrichment opportunity in being radicals and being attention seekers. And look, at a time when the left cannot rid itself of this and cannot seem to tell the difference between right and wrong, my personal view is that we can. We have a choice between standing up for civilization or barbarism. The left has gone with the barbarians. We can go with civilization, and I think it's going to work out all right if we do. That's my view.
Throughout your book, you discuss tensions between...
Can I add one more thing?
Please. I was just here trying to promote your book, but yeah. I mean, hey, you can take this anywhere you want.
Donald Trump has been a beacon of moral clarity on these issues. And it sort of is amazing to me that people who have attempted to attach their stupidity to him when he has never, ever been anything other than the most pro-Israel and pro-Jewish president we've ever had, ever. And he knows who the good guys and the bad guys are. He knows that Iran is the enemy. And he knows how to get people to the table and affect outcomes that are good for the West and good for our national security. He's done it time and again, but especially in the Middle East. And yet I see people on the right trying to attach their views to him when he has never, ever espoused any of these views, ever. Always moral clarity from the president on this stuff. I get that. I go back to the summer when he made the decision to attack Iran, a righteous decision, a smart decision. And all these people were hanging on him. Don't do it. You're going to cause World War III. Millions will die. Stupid. He just ignored it all. And he executed when he needed to execute at the exact right moment. They didn't even know we were there. We were in and out. And they didn't even know we were there. It was brilliant. But I have since that moment, all these people that wanted him to not do that have been trying to attack him, divide him from his people, really kind of eat away at his power within the Republican Party. That's how dedicated they are to this anti-Israel, anti-Jewish ideology. The president defied them, and now they're trying to destroy the conservative movement over it. And we just have to recognize it and not stand for it. But I think the president's been an amazing leader on this. And you go to Israel sometime and ask anybody, they'll tell you Donald Trump's their guy. And as Republicans and conservatives, we ought to be pretty darn proud of what he's done over there.
Scott, it's really striking. You are someone who is a political professional, a campaign professional. You're someone who understands messaging so well. But it really seems to me as though you're articulating a vision for what conservatism ought to be. Donald Trump is in the White House right now. He is not eligible to run for a third term yet. And so a lot of folks are thinking about, where is conservatism going to go? What is next? And it really seems to me as though your emphasis on the 80-20 issues, your being in the white hot heat of this political combat day in, day out, it's almost as though you're identifying what is the lane, what is the unifying thesis for what the right ought to be. What are the ways in which the conservatism of the 1990s is connected to the conservatism of the 2020s? I wonder, do you see any political talent out there, people that you think get it, people you think understand, how is it that we ought to communicate effectively in order to build and maintain that majority?
Rubio is the most effective communicator in the administration. And Vance is pretty darn good too, and with Kentucky roots, I might add. And so I personally believe they would unite the two sort of interesting coalitions of the party. Rubio, more of the old guard Republicans, they love him, I love him. Vance is one of the new sort of, I think, a great representative of the new kinds of Republicans that have come in. It's a formidable ticket. Nobody can replicate Trump. It'd be folly to try. But to carry it forward, we have to get authentic people who know how to talk to folks. I've been very impressed with both of them. I think Rubio was an inspired pick, and I think Vance, after he got done kicking Walz's ass in the debate last year, has not really stopped. And to me, that represents a pretty positive path forward, understanding that you cannot replicate Trump. It is impossible. It is the greatest political comeback since Napoleon. And he, I don't know how he does it, but I didn't really know him that well until February when I started writing this book, but hanging around him and observing him, he has innate political talents that are hard to describe and hard to quantify. Most two-term presidents do, and you build around that. No one really replaced Obama for the Democrats. No one really replaced Bill Clinton. No one. These guys come and go, and there's something special and interesting about them all. But for Trump, it's a different gear. It's a different level. So to try to replicate it, I wouldn't expect it. To try to carry it forward in a new iteration with new leaders who have their own brands, possible. But it's all going to turn on whether, at the end of this 4 years, people think we're on the right trajectory or not. And although I think we've talked about a lot of interesting issues here and a lot of successes, we haven't talked about the economy. And if people think the country's on the right track, or they're feeling better about their own personal lives, or if they think, we were in a hole, but we're digging out and we see the light at the end of the tunnel, if they think that, they'll reward us. And if they think we made the hole deeper, they won't. And so, some of this aspirations about the future of the conservative movement will run into reality if people are not feeling great about their own personal economic condition.
Speaking of political talent, here in New York City, we recently elected a new mayor, Zohran Mamdani, someone who, when it comes to messaging, hey,
comrades, pipe down.
Hey, I might not love the guy, you might not love the guy, but when it comes to messaging, you got to admit, there's some discipline there, right? There was a kind of relentless focus. I wonder if you could talk to us a little bit about the political talent, the political horseflesh on the left, the messages you see, and you're getting them day in, day out, the messages you're getting from folks on the left who are aspiring to win the White House or kind of, win back Congress. What should we expect to see from the left over the next few years?
Yes, his main talent was getting to run against Cuomo twice, which was, great for him. By the way, I have 35 chickens at home, all laying hens. One time, we accidentally got a rooster. Let me tell you about roosters. They crow all day, not just in the morning, and they sexually harass their coworkers constantly. We named our rooster Governor Cuomo. When we got him, that's what we named him. And I'm from Kentucky, and I know how it works around here. And so everybody else does here, too. Now, we impeached the governor, finally, back home in Kentucky, and they did the same thing here. So Mamdani, he's a great actor. I mean, you asked me about political talent. He's an acting talent. He is a terrific actor and ran against a terrible opposition, and that was enough. what can we expect out of the Democrats? It's obvious the energy in their party is behind this radical socialism. I was sitting on set election night with Van and Axe, and right before Mamdani came on, they were like, oh, Scott, he's going to come out and he's going to soften his rhetoric and reach his hand out, and all the people who are nervous about him are going to hear a message of positive outreach. And he starts quoting Eugene Debs within the first 30 seconds of the speech. And I looked over at Axe and Van, and I was like, there's your guy. There's your guy. Salute your new leader. But that's where their energy is. It's obvious. It'll be shocking to me if they don't nominate a socialist for president in 2028. They fought it off in 16. They fought it off in 20. They're not going to fight it off in 2028.
Do you think it'll be a socialist, or do you think it'll be Andy Bashir flanked by socialist advisors? Because that's my guess. My guess is that it's going to be
Bashir flanked by socialist advisors. That's what we have in Kentucky right now. I don't know about that. I think someone has to be able to channel the emotional energy. The best Donald Trump actor on SNL ever was Daryl Hammond. When they replaced Daryl Hammond, it was a huge mistake. But Daryl Hammond had the greatest comment about Trump ever. He said he's a genius empath. That's what you have to do. You have to be able to absorb and reflect the emotional energy of the electorate. That's what Trump got about the Republicans in 16 that none of the other 17 got. It's what Trump got about the country last year. It's what Mamdani, I guess, got about, enough people here in New York. You have to be able to absorb and reflect the emotional energy of enough people to win. And and it requires a bit of showmanship. It doesn't require advisors. It requires a bit of personal talent and showmanship. That's part of the game now. And so my impression is that it'll be somebody like that. It won't be a milquetoast person going, well, but I've got a whole Politburo here that'll help me. I mean, it'll be somebody who can personally understand the energy and reflect it back. And I don't personally, Bashir and I have known each other since we were 16. And when I started my company, he was my lawyer, believe it or not. I've known the guy my whole life. Now he views himself as some sort of transcendent, like quasi-political religious figure. It's very strange. But he'll have a hard time, I think, competing with people who are more authentically, radical anti-American socialists. But that's what the Democrats want. They want somebody who thinks America's rotten at the core. They want somebody who thinks capitalism has failed. And they want somebody who'd like to rip all of it out and install some other very un-American ideology. Bashir, I think, would have a hard time keeping up with the emotional energy of that.
Let's open it up for questions.
Yes. Thank you for sitting in the front. I was earlier worried this was going to be like a Baptist church and nobody was going to be here.
So you have a very plain-spoken, common sense commentary, but it also brings a kind of delight to the audience. And I think it's because of your comedic timing. And I'm curious to know where you think you got that comedic talent, and also what your favorite comedy movie is. Or comedy TV show.
This is a great question.
My favorite comedy movie? Caddyshack. Yeah. That's a great question. I watched a huge amount of late night comedy television before it became therapy for libs. And I mean, with my grandparents, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and as a kid, I watched every episode of Johnny Carson every single night. And I think that's where I learned.
When you were a kid, they should have let you go to sleep.
No, it was great. We watched Dallas, we watched Golden Girls, and we watched Johnny Carson. That's what we watched. But I don't know. I feel like for those of us, I'm 40. I just turned 48, and so I'm old enough to remember when comedians were comedians and not political activists. And so I think the modern comedian is not. Some are okay, but most aren't. And so I don't know. I think if you're old enough to remember the way it used to be, and you kind of remember how they did it, it's sort of easy to be reflective of that. Interestingly, spending time with Trump this year, just on that front, this is the funniest dude you could ever meet. It's like Don Rickles, Rodney Dangerfield and Dave Chappelle had a baby and Donald Trump came out. He's really funny, and he's a professional towel snapper. But he's very warm at the same time. And so this surprised me somewhat. I'd heard people say that, but it was how I found him to be. So thank you for your comment. And by the way, I think debating with a little good humor makes it easier to win the debates, because you never meet libs out there on the panel who can take a joke or make a joke. They barely can crack a smile. They are seething. They are seething with rage as they plot to put all of us in the re-education camps. And so, but I think more people like the way I do it than the way they do it. So thank you. Yes. Over here. Sorry.
I enjoy you on TV very much. Agree with much of what you said. The real question that I have is, you focused on 80-20 issues. It's sort of easy to agree with them. The 50-50 issues is the financial improprieties going on by both parties, not just all the money that Nancy Pelosi made, or you have Mikey Sherrod just win governor and forgot how she made $7 million. But Trump being pro-crypto and then doing meme coins with his whole family, his family doing real estate deals. I mean, it's pretty clear that there are improprieties on both parties. Everybody's figured out how to monetize things and make it work for themselves. Is anybody going to make it honest again? If you want to be a politician, but not at the expense of selling out the country.
My view on Trump is he was in business before he became president, and his family has every right to be in business now. The people that you're referencing, Pelosi and the Bidens and all, they were never in any business at all, except the business of politics. And I regard that as a key difference. I do think it's important to keep things separate, but I think Nancy Pelosi and what the Bidens did to use information that they had to enrich themselves is a far cry from a business family being in business their entire life and getting into politics for a short period of time. I find those things to be totally separate issues. I understand the criticism, and I'm not saying that it's invalid in how people might perceive it. But I regard the career professional Democrat barbarians as far different than a business family getting into politics for a short period and then getting out. That's my view.
Thank you.
When Trump originally brought up the immigration issue and said they're not sending their best, murderers, rapists, et cetera, he did a very good job of creating an 80-20 issue, because nobody wants murderers and rapists, et cetera, criminals in their country. The left has actually done a reasonably good job of starting to turn this into a 50-50 issue, because a lot of the illegal immigrants, other than being illegal immigrants, are not criminals. And it seems to me that the Republicans have done a very poor job of messaging that these other than their entry, criminal illegal aliens are still wrecking your schools, they're wrecking your ER, they're driving down your wages, they're driving up your rents, they're hurting a lot of people, and it seems like the Republicans are doing a very good job of doing that, and that's how to turn it back into an 80-20 issue. Any comment on how do you think we can do that?
Yeah, I've heard Vance actually talking about this lately, and he does a great job on wages and housing prices. When you flood the country with illegal aliens, it is competition for jobs, it makes wages go down, and it's competition for housing and makes housing prices go up. He's been right about that, and I think he's done a really good job on it. I also think the other thing that, if I had to advise them on the PR here, would be simply talk about how permissive do you want to be? Because when you let the permissiveness creep back in, that's when border crossings go from 0 to a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. I mean, that's why people were coming here, because it was a permissive structure. And so, some are violent criminals and some aren't, but they're all here illegally. And if people believe that they can come here illegally and be left alone and stay here illegally, the permissiveness creeps back in and the border is no longer closed. And if I were the president, that's exactly how I would put it. But I think on the economic pressures, I think you're 100% right. And if I were them, I might even go around and recruit local officials from communities that have faced these pressures the most, and possibly do a better job of elevating them into becoming national voices to warn of the ills of unfettered illegal immigration. I think it's good advice you raise.
Hey, Scott. Long time, first time. So
Hey, thank you.
and by the way, my young girls, we got 5 of them, up to 14, and I point out you as the beacon for somebody who goes into the belly of the beast and just fights your way out. So we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Looking forward to not only reading the book but sharing it. It'll be a great bedtime story in our household.
Are you saying it's going to put everyone to sleep? I hope that's not what you're saying.
Just the opposite.
It's fine if it does, as long
Never
as you
miss
buy
a beat.
it.
We love it. Awesome. Fantastic. My concern now is this guy on the West, Newscomb. He's overcome repeal and impropriety and blatant corruption, photographs, videos, everything, and he still just keeps showing up, and he's well capitalized. Where is he on your radar?
Somewhere between Chuckles and Bozo on my clown scale. I mean, one of the least serious national people out there, a complete and total clown. And now, there are Democrats, so they sometimes nominate complete and total clown, oftentimes nominate complete and total clown, so I guess I shouldn't discount it totally. But he is so inauthentic. That is, in this book, and what I think we all know, it's authenticity is really the only thing that matters right now in politics and media. Trump has changed everything. These people who exude inauthenticity fail almost every time. Harris was the most recent example. She could not exist in a world that demanded authenticity. I view him that way. And so I don't see it. I'm not a Democrat, so maybe I can't see it. But I think that if you want to turn the rest of the country into California, that's a choice. But I think most Americans wouldn't regard that as a good choice. And so I don't personally see it, but I guess we'll see what they want to do. But I think I think he is in politics for literally all the wrong reasons. And I think people kind of sense it.
I think we have time for 2 more questions.
So Scott, thank you so much for taking the time to come out to New York City, which is a very crazy place to live, obviously. But there is a crisis amongst young men, particularly young Christian men, who are lost in finding themselves going into the feeds of the pro-Stalinist individual that you alluded to, whose name I'm not going to repeat. What's the message that a lot of individuals like yourself would want to give these young men to give them some hope and some confidence that nihilism is not exactly the manner in which we should see the world and also, more importantly, see this country going forward?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily. I mean, we could sit here and talk for hours about all the motivations about why people feel hopeless or aimless or so on, and there are lots of reasons. But I think what we have failed to do is to instill a sense of patriotism in this country. It's our 250th anniversary next year. This is our next best chance to remind everybody that we live in the greatest country on earth and to remind them of why it is the greatest country on earth. And I think people are withdrawn into their own little worlds. They're isolated from other human beings. They don't feel like they're part of a community, let alone feel like they're part of a great country. And we could start with reminding them that, no, you're part of a great country, but being part of a great country means you also have certain responsibilities to yourself, to your family, to your community. I think we have a whole bunch of people in this country who are completely and utterly disconnected from the rest of their world. And when you're disconnected from the rest of the world, it's easy to hate the rest of the world, or it's easy to believe things that are fundamentally un-American. And so I don't have all the answers, but I do know this. If you believe in America and you believe it's the greatest country in the world, you are less apt to believe in some of these old hatreds that are rearing their ugly head. I mean, after all, it wasn't that long ago that this country relegated that ideology to the dustbin of history. And maybe time we take out the trash again, as far as I'm concerned. But I just think it all starts with a sense of reteaching people what it means to be an American, not just as an abstract theory, but as a personal responsibility.
Okay. I believe we have time for one more.
Hi, thanks again for coming. Lots of great things going on now with the administration. My question for you is what keeps you up at night, and what could Trump, how could he do better at addressing those concerns you have?
Well, what keeps me up at night? Losing elections. I mean, honestly, like the biggest danger to momentum is losing the next election. If they win, they will impeach the president again. If they win big and somehow get control of the Senate, I think Trump is right about this. They will eliminate the filibuster. If they were to win in 26 and 28, they will pack the courts. They will make D.C. and Puerto Rico states. They will do a lot of terrible things in a very, very short period of time. So what keeps me up at night is our political future. And I think we do have a lot of good things going right now, but it can all come to a screeching halt and go the exact opposite direction in the blink of an eye. So I worry about that. I hope President Trump spends 2026 doing what he does best, which is selling. We've done a lot of great things. He's put a lot of balls in the air, and a lot of them have gone through the hoop. But now it's time to sell, and it's time to sell domestically. I think he's been one of the greatest foreign policy presidents we've had in recent memory. That doesn't typically move the needle domestically. And so I think it's time to sell on the domestic front. I do think the big, beautiful bill was great. I think the welfare reform was great. Making tax cuts permanent was great. Middle-class tax cuts for working-class people was great. Solving the immigration crisis was great. But what we talk mostly about with him right now is foreign policy. And look, I'm a motivated guy when it comes to foreign policy, but most voters are motivated by domestic issues. So I want them to turn him back into the middle of this country and go out and remind people why we kicked their asses to the curb last year and put him back in. And I know that he can do it.
Scott, it was an honor and a pleasure to have you. Please join me in thanking Scott Jennings.
That was great. Really fun, man. This is amazing.